when they say so-and-so's religious. I'm like, you don't know that. All you know is he looks ritually observant. It's Maimonides said that you desecrate the name of God if you don't pay your bills on time. Desecrate the name of God. Is he religious? I don't know. Does he love the stranger? If so, how? Does he pay his workers on time? How does he treat his wife? How is he educating his children and his grandchildren? Like, all these things are religious imperatives and a lot more. Secular volunteers who, after October 7th, served hundreds of days, in Gaza. Those are religious men.
I hope everyone helped himself to a copy of Mark's latest book called God Was Right, How Modern Social Science Proves the Torah is True. Let me just start by saying hello to Mark and thanking him for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Mark and I became acquainted with each other, must have been like 8 or 9 years ago.
I think so, yeah.
As you see the hat he's wearing and the green and the orange jacket he's wearing orange because that's the color of United Hatzalah, Ichud Hatzalah. Mark is the chairman, the global chairman of Ichud Hatzalah, Eli Beer's famous organization of Hatzalah. He is the chairman, and he is, if I may humbly say so on his behalf, the largest contributor to Ichud Hatzalah. The volunteer network of volunteers, 4,000 or 5,000 volunteers in Israel, Jews, Christians, and Arabs. I was invited with Dini, actually, to go on a mission of Ichud Hatzalah it was Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, and it was like a 5 or 6 day mission. And we went out to Jerusalem, and first day we get on the bus, and I sat down somewhere in the back of the bus, and I meet this guy, Mark. I had no idea who he was. And all we did for 6 days was talk Torah on the bus. He just loves talking about Torah. And so we would get our seats in the back of the bus, and from the minute we got on the bus till the minute we got off, all he wanted to discuss was Torah. So I'm going to give the formal introduction to Mark. Mark Gerson, a New York-based entrepreneur and philanthropist, is the co-founder of Gerson Lehman Group, 3I members, United Hatzalah of Israel, and African Mission Healthcare. Something interesting about Mark, which maybe he'll touch upon, is as much as he gives to Jewish causes, tell me if I'm wrong, you give more to Christian causes?
About the same, yeah.
About the same. So he really believes in Tikkun Olam on the global scale. As you see, he does a lot of work in Africa with African Mission Healthcare. A graduate of Williams College and Yale Law School, Mark is the author of the national bestseller, The Telling, How Judaism's Essential Book Reveals the Meaning of Life. His articles and essays have been published in the New Republic, USA Today, Commentary, Fox News, The Wall Street Journal, and the Christian Broadcasting Network. Mark lives in New York City with his wife. You ready for this? Rabbi Erica Gerson. He is the Rebbitzin.
I'm the Rebbe.
Okay. and their 4 children. So Mark is a fascinating person. As you can see, he's a successful businessman. He's a philanthropist. But if I could humbly say, his real passion and love is for Torah. And he feels passionately that Torah is underappreciated by the Jewish people. And his life's mission is to share the beauty and the wisdom of the Torah and show people how it's modern and relevant to our current day-to-day lives. And it's really an honor to have you here, Mark, after all these years. Finally,
here we are. Yeah, I'm so great to be here.
So thank you very much.
I was looking at the book on the Kindle on the way over, and I quoted you in the book 7 times.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. I guess seven is the Jewish number of completion, but there's no significance in the 7. It just happened to be 7.
I guess we had some real good conversations.
It was all from the videos.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't the conversations. It was from your daily videos.
Oh, my daily videos. Okay.
Which are phenomenal. Everyone should watch them.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to begin the evening by asking Mark to just introduce himself in his own words, share a little bit anything you like about your own personal life, about your business ventures, and then, of course, about your passion for Hatzalah, but most specifically what we're here to talk about tonight, what inspired you to write this book.
Yeah.
I know you wrote a best-selling book about the Passover Haggadah, which is used universally by many families now. But what was the inspiration for this book? And
so the book on the Haggadah, it's called The Telling, How Judaism's Essential Book Reveals the Meaning of Life. The theory of the book is I discovered that the Haggadah is the best book, word for word, ever written. And you just have to know how to read it and how to extract its meaning, which is vast and deep. And it makes sense that it's such a great book because Pesach is the authentic Jewish New Year. The Bible tells us that Pesach is the head of months. In other words, it's a Jewish New Year. So what do we do on a New Year? We, of course, have a Seder, but the point of this Seder is to consider how we did in the previous year, who we are now, and who we want to become in the coming year. And the Haggadah is the great, truly great guidebook to that. And but in completing the book on the Haggadah, I realized what the Haggadah was, in addition to being the greatest book ever written, it's also the greatest hits of the Torah. I mean, the Haggadah doesn't have anything from Exodus. The story of the Exodus doesn't really use Exodus. He uses every other biblical book, and it's the greatest hits of the Torah. And so I realized that in studying the Haggadah that I should really study, as I had been in preparation for the Haggadah, because you can't understand the Haggadah without a thorough investigation of the Torah. I should study Torah more and write about Torah more. And at around that time, I realized what the Torah was, which is the Torah. It's not a history book. It's not a science book. It's not a cookbook. Arguably, it's not even a religious book. It's a guidebook. And the Torah makes hundreds, maybe thousands of claims of guidance about the challenges we have, the opportunities that we have, about all the questions that come up in our daily lives and the daily lives of people for the last 4,000 years. And this is not my opinion, it's Moses' opinion, because Moses says in Deuteronomy, this book is written for your benefit. Not God's benefit, your benefit, our benefit. So what kind of book is written for our benefit? A self-help book. So the Torah, I think, shouldn't be in the religion section of bookstores. It should be in the self-help section of bookstores. And
Mark, I'm sure you know this, but the word Torah, by show of hands, or just call it out, what is the literal translation of the word Torah? We all know the word Torah. What does it mean? It means instructions. When you were in school as a child, you had a morah. A morah is your teacher. Morah and Torah is the same word. So, Mark, what you're saying is literally the definition of the word Torah.
Fascinating.
Torah is the book of teachings, instructions, guidance.
And very practical teachings and guidance. Very practical. And and the guidance is practical and it's vast. And I realize it covers everything from how many times should you date somebody before deciding to marry them? What should you wear in the morning? What should we think about diversity and anti-fragility? Whether the subject is cultural, political, sociological, the most seemingly mundane things, but nothing's mundane. It's all in the Torah. So for 3,000 years or more, people have been asking, are the claims in the Torah true? Are they false? Or are they true sometimes and anachronistic other times? And what I realized is that in the 21st century, we had something besides faith and experience to make that assessment. And that's modern social science. Because modern social science, whose works have populated bestseller lists and documentaries and magazine covers, modern social scientists are addressing the same questions that the author of the Torah addressed. And so now I realize that with social scientific certitude, we could, for the first time, because this has exploded only in the 21st century, for the first time, we could assess, is the Torah true, false, or sometimes true and sometimes false and sometimes outdated? So the book is long because it had to cover a vast array of different subjects, because I wanted to know, is the Torah completely true or not? And what I found was that no matter what the subject was, the guidance, the highly specific guidance that the Torah offered, has now been proven absolutely true by secular modern social science, demonstrating that the Torah is true. And that gets to the question, who wrote the Torah? And all I have to say is that if someone gave anyone in this room the assignment, let's say someone gave Tom the assignment, because Tom wrote for the Economist for many years, someone gave Tom the assignment, I want you to write a book of guidance on every single subject that's going to be read in 3,000 years and considered correct about absolutely everything. What would the answer be? The answer would be, you're insane. Like, it's an insane assignment. But the author of the Torah accepted the assignment, and now we know he's been proven right. So who is he? Well, no human being could write a book this good. So was the book written by God alone, or after creation in the Bible, everything God does is in partnership with man? Or was it in partnership with man? I don't know. But all I know is that it has to be divinely inspired by completely rational and logical lights.
So I want to back up, Mark. Tell us about your Jewish upbringing, and when did your interest and then passion for Torah begin?
So I was raised in a wonderful, loving home in kind of in suburban New Jersey. It was a classic 1980s suburban New Jersey Reform synagogue. And So we didn't study Torah like we didn't study much Torah. Of course, the bar mitzvah, you study your portion, all that. But I started studying Torah really every day a little over 20 years ago, and it's the same habit. I mean, I have an addiction to exercise. I have to run every morning, 6 miles, and so I study the Torah on the treadmill every morning. You put an iPad right on the treadmill, and I watch your videos. That's where I got the videos from, and I could take notes and then follow up with afterwards to put them into the book. But it's a great place to study because when you're on the treadmill, the blood's literally flowing. You can't take a phone call. You can't fall asleep. You can't get distracted. It's just your body's ready, and it's a focused time to study. And thankfully, there's a lot of audio and video Torah commentary available. I wish there was more, but there's it's available, and so that's how I study. And then I'll find another hour or 2 hours during the day to study. I would say the book took 3.5 years to write. It probably would have taken 2 or 2.5 years if AI had been around when I wrote the book. The best thing to happen to Bible study since the printing press is ChatGPT. I study with ChatGPT. I studied in an elevator. Just ask a question, you get a really deep, profound, and correct answer. It's totally.
What age did you start engaging in Torah study?
Well, I'm 53 now, so probably a little over 20 years ago.
And what sparked that sudden interest?
It was really, I was having a cigar with a friend of mine, Jeff Balaban, at Club Macanudo, and he said, let's study the Haggadah. I said, the Haggadah, it's like what you read on Passover. It's a great time, the Seder, but is there really anything to study in the Haggadah? He said, oh yeah. And so we studied the Haggadah, and that began my journey in the Haggadah, and then I realized the Haggadah is really the greatest hits of the Torah, so that led to Torah study, and the more one studies the Torah, and I come from a completely rational, logical approach. I'm the least spiritual guy in the world, and but the more you study the Torah, the more I study the Torah, the more I study the Torah from that point of view, the more I realize just how deep it is and how interesting it is and how practical it is. And the fact that the Torah is a book of literally endless depth that is endlessly generative, I think is also another proof of the divine audience. Because most books, you read once, you're done. A truly great work, you might read 2, maybe 3 times. It's a good idea to read Anna Karenina at various stages of people's life. But this is the only book ever written that is endlessly generative, that produces new lessons, new teachings, new guidance every single time it's confronted. So it's incredible. Torah is an incredible gift to the Jewish people in the world.
So we just started a new year, 2026.
Yep.
Maybe some people are still trying to keep their New Year resolutions. Any insights in your book about making New Year resolutions and how to hold on to your resolutions?
Yeah, so it's a great way to start. I mean, so of course the Jewish calendar has 4 New Years. So why do we have 4 New Years? There's nothing particularly weird about it. The American calendar also has multiple New Years. We have the January 1st, which is the calendar New Year. We have fiscal New Years. We have the school New Year. And we have the national New Year. So we have Americans and Jews both have 4 or 5 New Years. And what's the point of multiple New Years? Because the New Year is such a great opportunity. It's too valuable to happen only once a year. So January 1st is as good as any to pick and to make resolutions. Now, most resolutions, as we know, fail. And I think the data says there's something like 82% of New Year's resolutions are forgotten about or certainly failed within, I think, 2 to 3 months. So the question is why, or better, how can we make a New Year's resolution stick? And I think the answer comes from there was an ancient biblical verse quoting contest, I think from the Talmud or maybe a little later, and it would have been the Talmudic times. And a bunch of the great rabbis were asked, what's the most important verse in the Bible? And Rabbi Akiva said something like, love thy neighbor as thyself. Another one of the greats says, another one of the famous biblical quotes. And then Rabbi Ben Pazi says, nope, it's Exodus 28:29. You shall sacrifice a lamb in the morning and a lamb in the afternoon. And the ancient text records he wins by a claim. Everyone agrees he's right. So why is this seemingly obscure verse the most important verse in the Torah? Because what it says is that the most important things we do are those we do in the morning and the afternoon, those things that we do continuously and by habit. And so the lesson for New Year's resolution is pick a resolution that we're going to do habitually. So every morning, every afternoon. And then the question is, well, how does it work? So it also works in terms of physical New Year's resolutions. It also works in terms of And some resolutions might be physical, I want to lose weight, whatever. Others might be, I want to change my character. And then the question is, well, that sounds like a big deal. How can I change my character? And there's a fascinating social science study I quote in the book. It's called The End of History Illusion, which is a significant majority of people, when asked, are you a different person than you were 10 years ago, will say yes. The same people say, I'm not going to change in the next 10 years, which is completely illogical. That's why it's called the end of history illusion, right? And so people think they're not going to change, but of course we do change. The only question is the change intentional or does it just happen? And the Torah is all about mindfulness and intentionality, which also makes secular common sense that we're going to change and therefore we should want to control our change and execute. So the question is, how do we do it? So this gets back to, we're talking about the lamb in the morning, lamb in the afternoon. It's all about the cultivation of habits. And Rabbi Yochanan of the Talmud says it takes 30 days for a new habit to form and to stick. And by stick, he meant to become a part of your character. And the social science says that's awful little. It should be like 90 to 100 days. So the bid ask is not that wide, but it's kind of an inspiring lesson from the Torah, validated by modern social science. The character change is actually pretty easy. So, but how do you do it? So all you have to do is to pick a character trait. This is as good time as ever to do it after New Year's or Pesach or really any time. Pick a character trait one wants to develop, and then start doing it. The Torah is insistent. It says, we shall do and we shall hear. Hear could also means understand. So if you want a new character trait, let's say I quote this in the book, if someone wants to become more giving or more generous or kinder, fake it till you make it. It's basically right from the Torah. Just start doing it over and over again, and then in a very objectively short amount of time, that act will become part of one's character. So if one wants to give charity more, well, Maimonides talked about this. Maimonides was asked, and I quote this in the book, Maimonides was asked, should someone give charity in small amounts every day or in one big gift at the end of the year? And he said, that's easy. One should give small amounts every day because in so doing, you become a giver. The Havetz Chaim, great 19th century sage, was asked by a young man, said, I'm going to work in a bank. Should I ask in deposits or withdrawals? He said, you work in withdrawals because by giving money all the time, you will become a giver. So just by doing the thing, whatever the thing is, that becomes part of our character very quickly. It's very inspiring because, if it takes, 100 days to develop a new character trait, really develop a new character trait, means we can develop 3 a year. It's actually not that hard. And I quote in the book, everyone, who knows the country song from 1980, All My Rowdy Friends Have Settled Down? Hank Williams Jr. It's like, no one ever listened to that song and said, that's amazing. All of his rowdy friends settled down. Like, no one ever expects his rowdy friends to have stayed rowdy forever. It's because we all acknowledge that characters change. And then the question is how to do it. And the answer is just start doing the thing that you want to become. And in a very short period of time, it'll become part of one's character.
Were you always philanthropic or something you had to work on?
Since my first business, since I was right after starting my first business in the late 90s, since I started my first business, yeah.
Is tzedakah something you had to work on, or is it something that came naturally to you?
Well, it's something I saw the joy in really very quickly. But I would say that the key to, the Torah's take on tzedakah is misunderstood and totally fascinating. We'll get to that in a minute. But if someone wants to give, I just follow Maimonides' advice, which is just start giving, and then one will become a giver. But the Torah's take is fascinating because in Deuteronomy, I think it's 15:10, somewhere around there, it has an astonishing statement, which it says, if you give generously and enthusiastically to the poor, you will be blessed in all of your undertakings. And blessings in the biblical context are always material. The womb gets blessed, children come. The ground gets blessed, food comes. So what it's clearly saying is that if you give enthusiastically to the poor, you will become richer. And this is astonishing for a couple reasons. One, God says in the Bible very clearly, do not test me. In other words, there are no deals. So why aren't there any deals? Why can't you make a deal with God? Well, let's say there are two young men in the synagogue who are vying for the affections of the same young woman, and they each make a deal with God. I'll pray, I'll study, I'll give, I'll do whatever. Well, they're both doing the same things and making the same prayer, and only one of them, if one of them, is going to get the girl. And so what God is saying is, I'm not the ATM machine where if you punch in the right code, you get the outcome that you want. There has to be a notion of faith, which is inconsistent with that of being a transaction. So it's very clear you can't test God, you can't make deals. But this is an exception. The deal is, if you give generously and enthusiastically to the poor, you will become richer. And we see that idea amplified in the Hebrew word for natan, which is a palindrome. So to give, it's a palindrome. It's saying the same thing, that once you give, you will receive. And because it also violates the natural law of giving. I mean, if I take something out of my pocket and give it to Steve, I'll have one less of it and he'll have one more of it. That's the natural idea of giving. If I give this to the rabbi, he has one more Diet Coke and I have one fewer. But when it comes to tzedakah, the Bible says that's not the case. It says you can make a deal and we're going to forget about the regular rules of giving. And then you come with the contributions to the tabernacle, and it has a very fascinating locution where it says you shall take a contribution to the tabernacle. And you can see someone asking the Bible, don't you mean you shall give a contribution to the tabernacle? It's like, no, you shall take. Because what the Bible's saying is that if you give, you will become richer. So giving is really taking. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, not makes you feel good. You will get richer. And so this is quite an astonishing claim. Violates the laws of giving. It's a promise in the Bible. So what does the modern social science say? Well, there was a study done about 15 years ago of, I think, 35,000 people. And it showed that those who give $100, people in one cohort give $100 more than people in the other cohort. The people who give make $375. So they net $275. They make 2.75x what they give in their own wealth. And you compound that over time, over a lifetime with an ordinary income, and it's like 1.3 million. Okay, so and Entrepreneur Magazine, which covered this, said, wow, there must be something mystical to this. It's like, maybe, but it's in the Bible. And then the question is, why? So why does it work? What's the kind of logical basis for the law? I'm a devotee of logic and reason. Well, what's the logical basis of the law? And I saw that, and I've seen it with being the chairman of United Hatzalah. No one ever goes to the internet and types in saving lives in Israel and makes a big contribution. People give in community. I mean, I've been at several events here for United Hatzalah where you bring lots of people together. This is a great community. You bring a community together, and obviously there's a leader of the community. It could be the rabbi. It could be the person whose home it is. That person will invite people from his or her community to their home. They'll hear about United Hatzalah. Most people might give a little, and some people will become really inspired, give a lot, and then host an event for their community. Because people give in community. All right, so if people give in community, what does that have to do with getting rich? They're still giving and not taking. Well, I was speaking at a church, actually right after Rosh Hashanah, and a man in the church came up to me, and I was talking about this, and he said, now I understand what my mother was doing all those years. I said, well, what was your mother doing? He said, every Sunday after church, she would shop at 3 grocery stores because there were 3 different members of the church who worked in each of the grocery stores. And I said, that's exactly it, is that people would much rather do business with those they know, like, trust, and are devoted to the same things they are. So if you're in a community, let's say this community, would you rather hire somebody or work with somebody who's in the Palm Beach synagogue or some random guy who's not? Of course, all things being equal, we'd rather work with somebody, give business to somebody who's in our community because they're devoted to the same things we are. We know them. We trust them. So when people give, they do so in community, and people want to do business with those who are devoted to the same cause that the community embodies. So the Torah promises it, the data validates it, and the logic explains it.
Beautiful. One of the things I love about you, Mark, is that you're not only a passionate about Torah study, but I really feel you're an example of someone who practices what the Torah instructs them to do, because it is an instruction manual. One of your examples is your tremendous dedication to United Hatzalah, and I've seen the tremendous philanthropy that you've done. Another thing that I love about what you do is that Mark hosts every Saturday morning a Torah class in his living room. And the third thing is, and this is what I want you to dwell on, every month Mark hosts a singles
Quarter.
Every 3 months?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If any of you have children or grandchildren in New York, let me know.
He hosts a singles events in his home to bring young Jewish men and women.
Yeah, Shabbat dinner for Jewish singles looking to get married within 18 months. Time limit on it because, but for the time limit, the young men will string along the young women.
Tell us how you got into that, and what have you observed of today's dating culture amongst the young men and women? And people say there's a shidduch crisis. People getting married older, not building families as much. What wisdom do you have to parents or grandparents from your first-hand observations in your own living room about how many singles get together in your living room?
We have 55 to 60, but we have very few marriages. But the last one, it was all children of Hatzalah donors and 3i members, and so both great communities, overlapping communities, great communities. And I said, just marry the person sitting next to you. Like, your chances of happiness on a net basis are much higher than if you go back into the market and date for another God knows how many years. But it's not really the wisdom I observed, it's the wisdom of the Torah. The Torah is very prescriptive about how to pick your spouse. So everyone here has asked probably at some point, or your kids have, like, how do I know that he or she is the one? The answer is right there in the Torah. The Torah gives very specific instructions about how to pick your wife. And it's in the story of the happiest marriage in the Torah. So the happiest marriage in the Torah, I think without a doubt, is Isaac and Rebekah. Not a perfect marriage. They have communication problems, but it's the happiest marriage in the Bible.
What makes you say that? Because most people don't think of it as the happiest marriage.
Well,
because they work they worked opposite each other about giving the blessings. Isaac wanted it to go to Esau. She got Jacob to disguise himself as Esau to get the blessing. So, why? Let's start with the basis. Why would you say that was a happy marriage?
Well, so that's reflective of their communication problems, because they clearly never had a discussion about who was the most qualified to take the birthright and lead the Jewish people. And they each also had a favorite son, which is also a problem. So I think what the Torah is saying is the best marriage in this Torah is not a perfect marriage. But Moses gets divorced. Arguably, I read the text as divorced. He sent her away. That's an ancient way of saying divorce.
The best marriage, the major issue in your life.
Well, I think it was telling us is that the best marriages they don't always do, but they can have significant issues. But we saw when Isaac is praying for Rebekah when they don't have a child.
She's praying for him.
And she's praying for him, yeah. And it's, interestingly, people who say, well, the Bible's polygamous. Yeah, every polygamous union in the Bible is a complete disaster. Isaac and Rebekah were monogamous. So it's as happy a marriage as is in the Bible. So the question is, how did they find each other? How did they pick each other? And the Torah lays this up so precisely. So Abraham's wife Sarah dies, and Abraham realizes he has this son who's 40, so too old. He's single, and he says, I have to find a wife for my son Isaac. And he dispatches his servant Eliezer to go find a wife for Isaac. And he says to Eliezer, and this is important, he says, go to Haran. So why Haran, of all the places? It wasn't like Haran was like a Jewish community. There were no Jewish communities. But he says, go to Haran. Why Haran? Because previously in Genesis, I think it's 15, Abraham, the text tells us, made souls in Haran. So whatever it means to have made souls, and we don't know, it means there were good people, they had good material, good human material in Haran. Lesson number 1, look for a spouse in a good place. Okay? Palm Beach Synagogue, great place. United Hatzalah Young Leadership Event, great place. Some bar down the street, probably not. So look in a good place. So he goes to this good place, and he meets a woman by the well. She will turn out to be Rebekah. And the text tells us she is very fair to look upon. So, okay, you got to find a woman that's attractive, or a man that's, well, actually they're different for the genders. But you got to find a woman that's attractive. And then, so very fair to look upon. And then she brings water for him and all of his camels, and estimated something like 25 trips of water without even being asked. She's exceptionally generous in giving. So the important thing here is, and then he says, you're the woman for my man Isaac. So on the basis of these two and only two characteristics, plus being from Haran, he says, you should marry Eliezer, teaching us, and I tell these young people, what's
Isaac,
yeah. And, but everything in the Bible is supposed to teach us something. So what this teaches us is to find a spouse, look for 2, maybe 3 characteristics that optimize for a good spouse, and then commit. And there aren't that many characteristics to choose from. Like, it didn't say that Rebekah liked warm weather vacations or cold weather vacations, or that Isaac's friends were funny. Like, these are irrelevant. Look for 2 things, no more than 2, maybe 3, that qualify for a good spouse. And Eliezer says, you're the woman for Isaac. And then she's given the choice. And people who say the Bible is sexist, again, this is one of the many examples that they don't know what they're talking about. The Bible is very progressive on gender relations. She's given the choice in ancient times, do you want to marry Isaac? And she knows 2 and only 2 things about Isaac. She knows that he's wealthy, so he's going to be a good provider, and she knows that he loves God. So on the basis of those two and only two characteristics, she says to Eliezer, I will go with you to marry Isaac. So Rebekah and Isaac each, I don't know anything, but Rebekah and Eliezer each know only two things about the other, and they decide we should get married. So someone could say, is this rash? And Genesis 24:67 anticipates that question. And it describes in the order of things in the Bible, and this is one of the ways ChatGPT is so helpful. You can ask, what's the significance of the ordering of this passage? But you don't need ChatGPT for this because it's so self-explanatory. Genesis 24:67, he married her, she became his wife, and he loved her. The order is everything. So go to a good place, find someone with two characteristics. Then he married her. Then she became his wife. Must be different than being married, or else every word in the Torah has a meaning. It cannot be redundant. So getting married and becoming a spouse must be two different things. So what must they be? Marriage is a legal commitment, but becoming a spouse, we know what it is. So we're talking about Rebekah. It's iterative acts of giving. So they got married, they became spouses, and then he loved her. So what the Bible is telling us is that love doesn't precede commitment, love follows commitment. So the key to finding a spouse is look at a good place, identify two or three characteristics that optimize for a good spouse. Don't think too much about it, just get married. Start doing spouse-like things, and the love will follow. And so is this rash? Is this possible? Well, I said, let's look at the country of India. The country of India has adopted Western customs on lots of things, Western medicine, Western capitalism, Western dress. They've not adopted Western dating customs. Chabad adopted Western customs in lots of things, but you go to the King David, you see those young people having Diet Cokes. This is what they're doing. It's what's called arranged marriage without coercion. And then so say, does it work? Well, the divorce rate now is about 42%, which is down from what it was in the 80s, and people might say that's good news. Not really, it's just because fewer people are getting married. So the divorce rate's 42%. Add to that 20% of couples who have been separated for 10 years or more are not divorced. I'm sure we all know people in this situation. So why would that be? It's what's called endless separation. He needs her health insurance, she needs his Social Security, they don't hate each other, they don't want to get remarried, why bother going through the process? But they're effectively divorced. So you can add the actual divorce to the effective divorce to the 7% that are still married but are chronically unhappy. And you get a marital success rate of about 35% doing it the way that we do it. So we secular people do it. So it's total failure. And then you look at the divorce rate in India is like 4 to 5%. And then like cynics will say, well, that's because there are all these trapped women. I'm like, well, there's no evidence that there are all these trapped women, but let's accept there are some women that would get divorced if they were in Palm Beach. I said, okay, so the divorce rate is depressed by something. Well, the secular divorce rate is depressed by the endless separation. So you could say both are depressed by something. And, I quoted there was a study of Orthodox Jews which said we have a crisis in our marriage because our divorce rates hit 10%. I mean, 10%, okay. I mean, it's 10%, maybe it's a crisis, maybe it's not, but it's not 42%. So basically, the argument in this chapter is the Bible is very prescriptive on how to find your spouse, and it's been proven absolutely true by modern social science. And by the way, every alternative that young people do against the Bible is a total failure. About the worst thing to do is to live with somebody. The divorce rates among people who live together are after 6 months. I don't know who gets divorced in the first 6 months, but after 6 months, the divorce rates are much higher. Why are they much higher? Because the couple that's playing house before they get married, what they discover is many of them get married. It's what's called, the sociologists call it sliding but not deciding. Because when you live with somebody, you just raise the exit costs. So it makes you make it easier. Hey, if we got married, some people, they actually own a place together. I mean, but, that's the extreme, and that's really inadvisable. But, they're living together. Neil Sedaka said breaking up is hard to do. Consider when you're living with somebody. And so living together is a sociological disaster. But, I quote eHarmony, which says that the average couple dates for 2.6 years before getting engaged. I mean, it doesn't take that long to know whether the person has the 2 or 3 characteristics going to optimize for a good spouse. It takes maybe a few weeks.
Mark, looking at what the whole world is talking about now with what's going on in Iran, and being that you wrote a bestseller book about the Haggadah, which is Moses' call for freedom from tyranny, from oppression, from a dictatorship. I was wondering if you see any lessons that we should pay attention to as the world may go through a dramatic shift now, whether America gets involved, whether Israel gets involved. Do you see any parallels or any lessons to be learned from the Haggadah, from the story of the Exodus from Egypt and Moses, to modern day current events that we're experiencing and witnessing right before our eyes?
Yeah, I think the most salient one is in how God identifies himself. In other words, God does a lot of things. So a lot of people do a lot of things, but on their business card, they can only have one thing. So what does God put on his proverbial business card? He does not say in Exodus and Deuteronomy, he does not refer to creation. He does not say, think about the Ten Commandments. He does not refer to, I'm the creator of the heaven and the earth. He says, I have led you out of slavery from Egypt. So according to God, the most important thing God ever did was to give us freedom. More important than creation, because he could define himself by one thing. He chooses liberation in Exodus over creation. It's that important to him. So what God is announcing is the most important thing to me and about me is liberating people from tyranny and bringing them to freedom. And so that is the most important thing to God of everything he's done, including the creating of the heavens and the earth. But there are a couple other interesting and important lessons from all this. So Moses says, of course, let my people go, but he never stops there. Every time Moses says, let my people go, it's let my people go so they may serve God. Some variation of that. And what it's teaching us is that freedom done well has to have a purpose. And so one needs to be liberated from tyranny, but also to have a purpose, a mission, and a good system that's going to follow it. And and I would say another lesson is from Exodus 15, which is when Amalek is the force that attacks us when we're hungry, thirsty, and near mutiny in the desert, when we're of no trouble to anyone, which also teaches us something about anti-Semitism, which is anti-Semitism exists completely independently of the Jew. So when Jews wonder, and this is maddening, but when Jews wonder, like, what did we do to cause this? The answer is you did nothing. Anti-Semitism exists independently of the Jew. And but the text tells us there'll be Amalek in every generation. So I didn't put that in the book because you don't need social science for that. That's history. But it's another case of how God was right. Is that there has been a real state-sponsored enemy of the Jew in every generation. And of course, right now that's Hamas, Hezbollah, all powered by Iran. And, the courageous Iranian people, and this courage is unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, this evil regime is massacring its people, and they keep coming back on the street night after night. And, anything we can do to support these the most courageous people in our day, these incredibly courageous people, night after night, who are coming and coming for their freedom, with gunfire against them, unarmed, is, we got to do.
There was one chapter here that really caught my attention. It was almost a little bit prophetic, and I wanted to ask you more about it. And that was, where is it, about Venezuela?
Oh, the chapter on corruption?
Yeah, which chapter was that?
Oh, I think that's towards the end. Probably the next, yeah. So there's the book's in 5 sections, and one section is on basically biblical politics. And
here it is. Why Yisrael Salanta jumped out a window and Venezuela failed.
Yeah. This was submitted in October of 24. So yeah. So in ancient politics, the ancient societies viewed corruption like we might view jaywalking. It's like, yeah, it's against the law, but it's impossible to enforce, and we shouldn't even bother. You saw that in the ancient history regarding the Olympics, when Olympians were doping back then in ancient times. But it was presumed that every society was going to be corrupt, that rulers could not be stopped, and one shouldn't even try too hard. This is the case all over the ancient world. Rulers could not be stopped from using their public positions to get private benefits. And that was accepted as conventional wisdom all throughout the ancient world. And in comes Moses, and The most severe rebellion against Moses in the Bible, of course, is Korach's rebellion. And what Moses says is, I have not taken even one donkey. So why would he say that? Nobody accused Moses of taking one donkey. Because what Moses was saying was, even if I had taken one donkey, I would be an illegitimate leader and their rebellion would be justified. So what Moses is saying, it's most point of error, but it's all throughout the text. What Moses is saying and what the Bible insists upon is any measure of corruption in a political society renders the whole system illegitimate. So what the Bible is saying is there can be no corruption. And Moses is the exemplar of that, but it's taught all throughout the Bible. And to say in ancient times there can be no corruption is completely insane. But the Bible says it. And then let's go to modern times. So let's use the Venezuela example, which was I put that in the chapter of the title. So in 1950, the 4 wealthiest countries in the world were the United States, Switzerland, New Zealand, and Venezuela. And of course, Venezuela was so wealthy because of its oil resources. And I have a citation of it. It's on YouTube, of course. There's Standard Oil commercials from 1950 about how Venezuela is an emerging paradise, which it really was. And then the data in the book showed how Venezuela went from being one of the top 5 to being one of the bottom 5, while still having an extraordinary amount of natural resources. And the answer, which I demonstrate, is just corruption. And it's a case in Venezuela, but it's a case throughout the world, where you can trace the wealth and poverty of nations to how corrupt the nation is. It's what I learned from my work at Africa Mission Healthcare, what doctors call dose dependent. Corruption in, poverty out. Anti-corruption, and it's the opposite too. And you can measure society, I argue in the book, by what it considers to be corrupt. So the United States and Israel are fundamentally non-corrupt societies. Why? Because everyone says they're corrupt, right? And then they say, well, what's corrupt? And what people consider corrupt in these fundamentally non-corrupt societies would be laughed at in genuinely corrupt societies. But a society that criticizes itself for being corrupt and points to things that could be considered minor, that will be considered minor in other cultures, that's a fundamentally non-corrupt society, and you can see that in their GDP per capita. And there's a very interesting study too in 2006. Up until relatively recently, in New York, if you had a diplomatic plate, you couldn't get a parking ticket or a speeding ticket or other kind of motor vehicle violation. I think that changed, but under Bloomberg. But for a while, that was the case. And then these social scientists did a study as to which countries had the most violations. Of course, that were not prosecuted because you couldn't prosecute them, but the violations were logged. You could trace it to just the most corrupt countries had the most violations. Israel had 0 or 1. The countries that we think of as non-corrupt, 0 or 1. But the corrupt countries, it's just there's a rule, we can violate it, great. And those were the poorest countries, the most corrupt countries, and Moses totally called it, which is astonishing. I mean, and we have to take a break, think of how astonishing it is, because in modern society, we'll say, of course, there should be anti-corruption, should be non-corruption. But in the ancient world, that was completely insane. But Moses insisted on it, and he's been proven
That
absolutely
I
right.
didn't even take a donkey.
Yeah, exactly.
And that donkey was for transportation to get from Midian back to Egypt to rescue the Jews, which he could have justified as, I got to get point to do my job, but he wouldn't even take a donkey for the transportation to go on his mission to redeem the Jews.
And what he was basically saying is, if I had even taken that donkey, I would be illegitimate.
That's interesting. You mentioned Christian African healthcare. Mm-hmm. A number of years ago, I read that you announced the $18 million gift for healthcare in Africa.
Yeah.
It seems like your two favorite organizations is United Hatzalah and African Healthcare. I'm just wondering, there's so many wonderful charities. Why are these your two favorite charities?
Well, yeah, so we gave an $18 million gift. We actually gave a little more that year, but we said it was 18 because we want to give as Jews.
Hi.
We want to give as Jews, yeah. And I think that's an important Torah lesson. Like, why is the mezuzah on the doorpost? Because when you go in and you go out, you go in and out as a Jew. There's no bifurcation of light. So, So Africa Mission Healthcare, my best friend from college called me in around 2001, and he said, as you know, I'm a Christian, and I feel called to those to serve those whom Jesus in the book of Matthew calls the least among us. And he said those are people right now who are dying or otherwise being ravaged by HIV and AIDS in Africa in the early 2000s. So he went over as a Christian missionary doctor, and I learned everything I know about Africa. I learned from him, from John. But I learned what Christian missionary doctors are and what they do. And these are people who will go to Africa and there are other places too, but the poorest places in the world, and devote their entire lives in conditions that we here in Palm Beach cannot imagine to serving the poor and the dispossessed. I mean, very often without running water, without electricity, without health care except what they can provide. I mean, one of the greatest missionaries ever he was Dr. Tom Katina. He serves in the Nuba Mountains. And, where he was serving, there's one word for food because there is only one food. So, and Tom has no running water, no electricity, and the hospital has it, but not his home. So, the Bible, the Bible commands us as Jews. It says, "You shall love the stranger," and love in the Torah context is not an emotion, but it's what Rabbi David Wolpe calls an enacted emotion. You can't. Love is not a feeling. It's a set of actions and responsibilities. You can't love your wife or your children or anybody and not do anything or extraordinary things for and with them and enjoy doing it. So that's what love is. Love has to be expressed in action or else it's not love. So when the Torah tells us, you shall love the stranger, I think where it's incumbent upon us as Torah-loving Jews to ask, well, how can I best execute that commandment? Because the commandment it is. So how can I best execute it? And for us, the answer was, well, the stranger is someone who is sick or injured or potentially sick or injured in Africa. These are people that will never know our name, that we'll never meet, and that are completely without anything resembling healthcare, to the point where, if your daughter breaks her leg or your wife needs a C-section or the man develops a hernia, without the Christian missionaries there will be no treatment. Not bad treatment, no treatment. And in come the Christian missionaries and are not only providing this treatment, but are building the institutions that do the training and build the hospitals that will amplify care very significantly into the future. And so we said, what's the highest ROI return investment for us to execute our Torah obligation to love the stranger? And we were drawn to the support of Christian medical missionaries serving in Africa. And whenever the missionaries come through the U.S., they'll invariably come through New York. And, we'll always have them to our home because we want our children growing up knowing these truly great men and women that say, these are the people that are worthy of your admiration, your respect, and your wanting to be like. And we've just been really blessed to have this community, really, of Christian missionary doctors who we become close to and have been such an incredible example for us and our children. And we've been very fortunate to be able to support their work. And that's another thing about philanthropy is, we really hate it when people say, well, it's just money. It's like, with the Christian mission, Ellie Beer says the same thing, because it's just kind of a truth that there's no such thing as just money. They're like without, and Ellie says this about Hatzalah, and the missionary doctors say it about all that they provide. They said, without money, we'd be working with Band-Aids. There's no such thing as only money. And so we've just been so fortunate to be able to partner with these really extraordinary men and women throughout Africa and follow the same Bible that we do. To love the stranger. And it's been great to...
And tell us about the volunteers of United Hatzalah.
Really the same thing. I mean, these are men and women, as the rabbi said, of all faiths, Jews, secular Jews, observant Jews. I don't like the term religious. We can get into that. But secular Jews, ritually observant Jews, Christians, Druze, Muslims, everybody. And our goal is that when there's an emergency, when there's a call to the emergency number, whether it's 911 here or the equivalent in Israel, if it's a genuine emergency, which many of them are, of course some are not, just like 911 calls here, it's the exact same kind of call. The person calling, if it's an emergency, needs help within 3 minutes and ideally 90 seconds, because that's the amount of time that separates life from death when one is choking, bleeding, having a heart attack, stroke, or drowning. So you need help immediately. The problem is that, don't try it now, but if you call 911, it would probably take an ambulance 10 minutes to get here. Not because there are too few ambulances, not because Palm Beach is investing insufficiently in ambulances, just because they're too expensive to be ubiquitous and they're too big to be fast. So the United Hatzalah innovation, or I should say the Eli Beer innovation, his great vision was that when you have an emergency, you don't need an ambulance right away. You need a trained and equipped first responder right away. And that could be done by a volunteer who's just going about his or her day. And then they get the call, there's an emergency in their immediate vicinity. They always have their medical bag on them. If they're in the city, they'll probably be an ambicycle, medically equipped motorcycle outside, and they can immediately get to the victim and begin treatment before the ambulance arrives. So now there are 8,000 volunteers who will drop anything they do. They drop anything and everything they're doing, whether they're having Shabbat dinner with their family, whether they're asleep, whether they're at work. They just drop anything and everything to rush to the aid of whoever has called for an emergency. Obviously, not knowing who it is. Doesn't matter what the person is, who the person is. It's someone in need, and they'll drop anything to go help and administer that care. And in so doing, save a lot of lives. And
one of the things I'm impressed about you, Mark, is Mark's a successful businessman, a huge philanthropist, as you heard. 5 or 10 years ago, he gave more than 18 million to Christian missionaries, which in those days was even more than it is today. United Hatzalah, also tens of millions of dollars. But when I asked Mark where he's staying on this trip, he didn't say the Breakers. He didn't say the Four Seasons. He's staying at the Hamptons Inn in West Palm Beach. And I would like you to share your philosophy or your relationship with money in terms of how you use money for tzedakah, for philanthropy, to make the world better, to fulfill the biblical obligation to love your neighbor as yourself. But what do you think about materialism and wealth in terms of personal use and asset?
well, I think it's what the Torah says, which is, of course, you have to take care of yourself and your family, and then in the same breath. Start thinking about in doing, because thinking about that doing is meaningless, but thinking about in doing tzedakah and doing it continuously. And as we discussed, there's no cost to doing it, because if someone gives generously and enthusiastically, they will become richer. So it's when someone, when we give, we think about what's the ROI, just like an investment. What's the ROI? How many lives have we? There are only 3 legitimate uses of tzedakah. There's other kinds of social engagement, but when we think about pure tzedakah, like the Bible talks about, there's saving lives, ameliorating pain, and creating opportunities for the poor. So when we think about it, like what's the ROI? What's the highest ROI we can get in any of those 3 categories? And then, of course, building the institutions that enable all of that. So what's the highest ROI? And that's the question we ask. And it's it's a blessing to have discovered the organizations that we have. So I'm chairman of United Hatzalah and African Mission Healthcare, and with Dan Ock, co-chairman of Eagles Wings, which is it doesn't fit in one of those 3 categories, but what Eagles Wings does is it's a parachurch ministry of evangelical pastors who we send on 12-day trips to Israel. Well, they'll go as tourists and come back as Zionists, and then we sustain them in a Christian Zionist community when they return, because the future of support for Israel in America and for the Jewish people in America is not going to be in places like this. It's going to be in evangelical churches. And there are 85 million evangelicals in America, and if there's a young pastor, and we do optimize for youth, because again, it's all about ROI. If there's a 31-year-old pastor, we say he has 45 years ahead of him on the pulpit, when he's either going to speak about his love of Israel, of the Jewish people, of Jewish texts, and of the need to support the Jews in times of need and all times, or not. And a trip to Israel is so essential in cultivating that deep relationship. And then it's got to be sustained, again, in community. They're in a community with other pastors, and works magnificently. Eric and I are going on Pesach this year is April 1st. We're going on March 28th to a church in Texas. So two years ago, we led the largest Christian Seder experience ever. It wasn't a Seder because it wasn't on Passover, but it was everything. Everything that would happen in a Seder happened. We had 700 people in the church. This is a pastor. He had no connection with Israel, the Jewish people. He went on an Eagles Wings trip. He develops love for Israel, then love for the Jewish people. Now he's taken, I think, at that point, it was 7 trips from his church to Israel. And so we did a Seder for 700 of his, I said to the group, I'm like, this is amazing. Like, could my grandparents have imagined that my wife and I would be leading a Seder at a church for 700 people? Inconceivable. And so I was speaking on the book at a church in Harker Heights, Texas, and I said this, and then the pastor, Stephen Martin, he said, well, come this Passover, that will be the second largest Christian Seder experience. So if anyone's going to be in the Waco area on March 28th, he'd love for you to come, and so would I. And it's he has a church and 4 satellite churches, so we'll be in one of them. He's beaming it to the others. It's going to be a huge Christian Seder experience, and there's just a ton of love that's potential love that's out there for the Jewish people from evangelical Christians who become some of our closest friends and partners. And so through Eagle's Wings, we've been able to develop and cultivate these relationships. And, God bless Bishop Stearns and all the pastors that he's cultivated. And again, ROI, that it costs $6,000 to sponsor a pastor to Israel, and another $1,000 or $1,500 to sustain him in this community and get a friend for life. And interestingly, Eric and I asked the pastors, like, what was the most salient part of your trip to Israel? Like, what really stood out? They all say, Shabbat dinner at the home of an Israeli. Like, Shabbat dinner, like, you could do that at our house whenever you want. Like, you don't have to go to Israel for that. And they said, no, but it turns Israel into a real place with real Jews, and that's the authentic Israeli experience. But it's great being with them on these trips. And
I want to leave a few minutes to have questions from the audience. If anyone has a question for Mark, please feel free. Go ahead. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Marlene Zabamler, a convert with Palm Beach Synagogue. And one of the things I don't understand is in the Bible, it absolutely says that we own the tomb of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
very clear. Yeah.
There it is. Why are we sharing it right now? And where in your book does it address any of that issue?
No, because there's no really social science about that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, Abraham makes a very explicit purchase of that land, and and one could ask, like, why does the Bible have to go through all the details of the purchase? And the answer is probably to remove any ambiguity in the future. And but that's no, you're absolutely right. But the story of the purchase is fascinating. It's a fascinating study of business, actually, how the deal actually happens. Very sophisticated commercial description. But no, it's a clear exchange of money for land, right there, right where they're buried.
So why can't we enforce that today? Why do we give back land that we win in a war? Where is certainly David was a conqueror and kept everything.
Yeah.
So why are we not learning?
Well, I think the lesson to learn is our enemies. It's like people say the Iranians or whoever, they're not rational. No, they're totally rational, because what's a question rationality asks? The question it asks is are these means worth the ends? And the ends to them are killing the Jews. And that end is so valuable that almost any mean will be rational. And I think we as a Jewish people are beginning to realize that, hopefully, and act accordingly.
Mark, maybe it'll be your second book, political science.
Well, but yeah,
Your third book, economic science.
I think it's all in the Torah. But one of the 5 sections is on kind of biblical politics. There's a chapter on diversity, chapter on anti-fragility. Max.
What modern social science studies surprised you the most?
Oh, great question. Oh, they're all so interesting. Many of them are really interesting. Which ones were surprising? Well, certainly the one that showed that if you give to charity, you will become significantly richer. That's counterintuitive. That's surprising. Another one that's surprising is, okay, so let's talk about last Torah portion, Shmoth, right? So why does God pick Moses? God picks Moses because he's in the desert. I mean, there are a few reasons why God picked Moses. Just like there are a lot of reasons why anyone will make an important decision, right? There's often not one reason. But one of the reasons is from last week's Parsha, where Moses is walking through a desert, and he sees a bush that's burning, but it's not being consumed. And the text tells us he turned to look. And then after he turns to look, he says, it's not a bush, basically. So what does that teach us? That Moses is a great noticer. And he allows what he notices to change his worldview. He says, because bushes that burn should get consumed, but this seeming bush is burning, but it's not being consumed. Therefore, it might not be a bush. He's a great noticer. Lots of people presumably passed by burning bushes in the desert and kept going, not noticing it wasn't being consumed. Moses notices, and his mind's so open, it changes his worldview. And then God says, "You're my man." Right after that, it's the proximate cause. So So interesting. Like noticing, is that important? Well, let's look at the social science. So there's this really interesting 1-minute video on YouTube of a study from 1998, I think done out of Yale, where a bunch of girls are throwing a basketball to each other, and the viewer's instruction is count the number of passes they make. It's really easy. They're just passing a basketball for 1 minute. And in the middle of the video, a guy comes out in a gorilla suit, just pounding his chest. And then at the end of the 1 minute, the question wasn't how many passes, but did you notice anything? Half the people didn't notice the gorilla. So that teaches us noticing is hard. And then the question is noticing important? And there's a whole variety of studies on motor vehicle safety. And most accidents occur in the immediate vicinity of one's home. Say, okay, well, most driving is done immediately. Yeah, but corrected for that, most accidents happen in the vicinity of one's home. Say, why is it? And the answer is shown in driving simulations that when we become used to a routine, we miss changes in the routine. We don't notice them. So, and this gets to the question. I think I represent the title of that chapter. So we don't notice. So like if there's an encumbrance in the road on a route you often take, you won't notice it. Whereas if a route you don't take, you're more likely to notice it. But we don't notice. And so why are there so many motorcycle crashes? Again, there can be many causes. One cause, of course, is if you get tapped with a car, you'll probably be okay. If you get tapped with a motorcycle, it's a lot worse. Definitely one cause. That's not the main cause. The main cause is what the scientists or the people who study this called look but fail to see. Fascinating term. Look but fail to see. So I looked. I saw the motorcyclist. I saw him, looked, but failed to see. So I looked, but I didn't see him. In other words, I looked, but I didn't notice, and I crashed into the motorcyclist. This is why motorcycle riding is so dangerous, is because noticing is that hard and that important. Okay, so what are the applications for our life? Well, really profound. I mean, certainly with just the basics of safety, like noticing is really hard and really underrated. So I tell my kids, whenever you go out into the street, I want you to tell yourself, I am in a street right now. There are cars around. Any one of them could hit me and kill me, right? Because and that'll really train the mind to notice what you otherwise wouldn't notice. But also it exists on a non-physical level. I mean, when if someone in your environment, it could be is falling, not literally, but falling into some kind of a problem. I think what the Bible is telling us is you got to become a noticer like Moses. You got to notice and intervene quickly, and it's hard and important to notice. So that was interesting. But every chapter has really interesting social science that confirms what the Torah said. Yeah.
I wonder if you used in the studies the Zohar as an adjunct to Torah in terms of your own research and how that correlated to science as well.
It's a great question. I didn't. I mean,
Kabbalah.
Yeah, Kabbalah. No, I didn't. I'm a total rationalist, and therefore the Kabbalah doesn't speak to me. Like I'm the least spiritual guy I know. When people start talking about souls, and it loses me. So, that being said, I teach Torah to Eagles Wings, evangelical pastors and leaders Eagles Wings every Tuesday, and it came up today. It was really interesting. So Nadav, and we're going through Leviticus. One of the great things about teaching Torah to evangelicals is that they're not in the Parsha calendar, so you can really go deep. So we spend the year on Leviticus. And the Nadav and Abihu light the strange fire, and then it consumes them. But then after the fire consumes them, their cousins have to take them away from the sanctuary. So wait, if they were consumed, like how are their bodies being taken out of the sanctuary? Well, maybe it was their soul that was consumed. That's the closest I can come to accepting the notion of the soul. But because something got consumed. But no, I mean, I cite, I think I cited Rabbi Scheiner more than anybody. Probably Maimonides, Sefer HaYinuk, your videos, but no Zohar.
Let me ask you, we have a question right here. Go ahead.
My name's Alexander.
Thank
You
you.
mentioned very quickly that you don't prefer to describe people as religious.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah. Okay, I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, yeah, you see this in Israel all the time when they say so-and-so's religious. I'm like, you don't know that. All you know is he looks ritually observant. It's Maimonides said that you desecrate the name of God if you don't pay your bills on time. Desecrate the name of God. So when we say someone to be religious is a lot more than ritual observance. It means, is he religious? I don't know. Does he love a stranger? If so, how? Does he pay his workers on time? How does he treat his wife? How is he educating his children and his grandchildren? Like, all these things are religious imperatives and a lot more. So is someone, and I would say, I know so many, young Hatzalah volunteers. You could call them secular. I don't call them secular, but they might call themselves secular. Secular volunteers who, after October 7th, served hundreds of days, in Gaza. Those are religious men. Okay, I don't know what their observances. I don't care. They're religious men because Zionism is completely integral to the Torah and to the Jewish religious life. Completely integral. You cannot have Judaism without Zionism. It's like taking the heart out of the body. And these young men are sacrificing so much to defend the state and its people. So to me, they're deeply religious, regardless of how they keep Shabbat or Yom Kippur. I don't know. They're deeply religious people. So I think being religious is a complicated question that can't be answered by the clothing someone wears.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Sharon Joy Harris. I'd like to find out from my nephew. He lives in Manhattan.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'd like to set up.
Oh, yeah, just email me at mark@godwasright.com. I got the domain for $10. $10, I got the domain. I don't know what, but $10, yeah. Yeah, send me his name and email, and we'd love to have him at the next one.
Yeah, because he just graduated to school.
Oh, perfect age for this, yeah.
And he just hasn't met anyone. So I said to my sister, let's.
This could be Bashert, yeah.
Absolutely recommend it.
Oh, you attend?
Great.
Yes, been a lot.
Did you meet your Bashert there? Okay.
We got a question here.
My name's Rebecca. So my question, religious versus spiritual.
Right. Well, that's a great question. I think it was Rav Yisrael Salanter who said, the material needs of others are my spiritual concern. So I have no use for people who, if people do it, if people want to do it, take a break, God bless them. But it's fine. It's not good, it's not bad, it's fine. If people want to say, I want to go off into the woods and be spiritual, that's a you thing. Go ahead. It's not a God thing, it's a you thing. If you think you need to do that, if you think it's enjoyable, instead of watching football on Sunday, go ahead. But no, I think Rav Yisrael Salanter, like with everything, he put it so well. It's like spirituality is solving for and not only material, certainly material concerns, but if someone is suffering, helping someone who's suffering, whether they're suffering psychologically or whether they're suffering. By the way, you had an incredible video 2 days ago. Speaking about that, I would have quoted in the book. I was thinking as I was listening to it, it relates to this, where you said that when people have a physical illness, they don't say, I am COVID or I am whatever. But when people have a mental illness, they define themselves by the illness. They'll say, I am depressed or I am schizophrenic or I am this or that. And your point is why? It's like, why are you defining yourself by your illness? Which was and I would have quoted that in the book. It would have been the 8th mention. 8's a significant number too. Yeah, next book. But because there's a chapter in the negativity bias. So the negativity bias is the phenomenon identified in the Torah when Jacob switches the blessings of Ephraim and Manasseh. I argue that the negativity bias says that we will, because Joseph names his first son after the negative, Manasseh, and his second son after the positive. You would know the exact translations, but of course. And then Jacob switches it, and he says, no, the positive has to come first. But there's still a blessing for the negative. But the negativity bias says that we weigh or value negative things significantly more than positive things. So we've all experienced this financially. It feels a lot worse to lose X than it feels good to win or to make X. Right? We've all experienced that. And so that's a negativity bias. It's also why what bleeds leads. It's also why negative campaigning works. And then so I said, all right, so the negativity bias is established in the Torah and it's established in, the Rabbi, I quoted the Rabbi on this, because the laws of kosher, the fish has to have fins and scales, right? But all fish that have scales also have fins. So why would it say fins? Because every fish, why would it just say scales? So what the great Rabbi, who I quote all the time, what he said was that if it was only scales, it would be all negative. So it's not about the fish, it's about teaching us. So because the fins propel us and the scales keep away bad things. Anyway, so but But I asked the question in the book, why did the anti-smoking... So in 1965, the same percentage of people who smoked is as are obese today, 45%. So why did the anti-smoking movement succeed so much? Well, it was entirely negative. All of us here are old enough, maybe Max is not old enough, but the rest of us here are old enough to remember the commercials and the warnings about anti-smoking. And I trace it in the book in how 1965, it was pretty mild, and the warnings got more and more visceral up into the 1980s. And it's because negativity worked, but it never said, stop smoking and you'll be healthy. It said, stop smoking or you'll die of lung cancer, with a picture of the lung. Like really, so it worked. It was a great use of the negativity bias.
It's coming back.
It's coming back, but not in the numbers it was.
Well, wait.
Yeah. But the numbers it was, I mean, I quote this in the book, a few years ago, it was declared the first smoke-free generation, which was defined as like fewer than 5% of a cohort smoking. It may be coming back, but 45%. So the question is, why did the anti-smoking movement succeed where there's no anti-obesity movement? And I said there are a few reasons, but one of which is this whole notion, which I really don't agree with at all, of fat shaming, which says that if you accuse me of being obese, you're violating my very identity, so how dare you? And I go through how the consumer products companies are in an unholy alliance with the left on this, and Bill Maher had a great bit on this, which I quoted. But I was really thinking about, I would have included this in the chapter, because I wrote in the book that no one should identify themselves as a fat person. Like, why do you say I'm fat? Say, I'm a person, describe yourself any other way, who happens to have some weight to lose. Like, and it really struck me when you were saying that, it's just the same thing. Why I wrote this in the book, like why identify with your fat? Trigger the negativity bias and say, I have to lose the weight so I can be healthier, so I can live with my children and grandchildren for longer. And that's really what the Torah says too. It's like, why does it say about Shabbat, you shall guard your Sabbaths? Well, what are the two? Only one day a week is a Sabbath, so why does it have it in the plural? And it's because there are really two Sabbaths. There's the Sabbath of what we can't do so that we can do other things. So on the Sabbath, we can't do a lot of things to liberate us to spend the day with our family, with our friends, with study, with prayer, with recreation. The negative doesn't exist by itself. And, our friend Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg, he says those who spend all day Saturday on the couch, they're Sabbath violators. Because they may not violate any of the rules, but they're not giving themselves to this holy day, which is a day of genuine recreation. So negativity bias in the Torah, it says the negative exists so that we can do the positive, which also explains it in evolutionary terms. Like, this is an interesting study, Max, is in the book that why do people develop food aversions? In other words, why do people just not like certain foods? Most food aversions develop pretty late in life. And the reason is, and they develop after one bad experience with the food. And that's the negativity bias kicking in, which is, and it makes total evolutionary sense because one bad meal can kill you, but one good meal can't save you. Thank you.